There was nothing unusual about the corner of 52nd and Harrow. No cracked pavement, no twisted lampposts or dark alleyways stretching out like fangs. Just a streetlight flickering in a lazy, indifferent ribbon, and a rusted bench half swallowed by ivy. It was the kind of place that felt more like a suggestion than a real location, like a half-forgotten memory at the back of your mind. And yet every Friday at midnight, without fail, I returned. The first time I saw him, I thought it was my mind playing tricks. I'd just left my shift at Murphy's, an old bar with sticky floors and regulars who smelled like ashtrays and loneliness, and the night air felt strange, heavier than usual. As I turned the corner, I saw a man standing beneath the flickering light, hands in his coat pockets, head tilted down. He didn't move, he didn't speak, but I knew him. It was the way he stood, crooked, like the world had taken a bite out of one side of him. The way his shoulders hunched forward, as if you were always waiting for a blow. I couldn't see his face, but the shape of him, the outline against the light, it was unmistakable. My father had been dead for 7 years. I didn't approach, I didn't speak, I just stood there, heart pounding like a war drum, in my chest, until a car passed between us and the vision vanished. I told myself it was grief, residual trauma, maybe even the whiskey I'd stolen in the back room before closing. But the following Friday, I went back. Midnight, sharp, I stood across the street, and there he was again. Same coat, same silence, same weight pressing down on my chest. This time, I stepped forward, just a few feet, and then another car came by, faster this time, and he was gone again. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? My father had died in a car accident on that very corner. A hit and run. The driver never stopped, never looked back. The only witness had been an old woman, with cataracts, who thought it was a dream. There was never justice, just the corner, and the stain on the road that the rain eventually washed away. By the third Friday, I was obsessed. I started counting the minutes to midnight, waiting in my apartment with the lights off and the blinds drawn, heart twitching like a live wire. I hadn't dreamt of him in years, not even once, but now he lived in the edges of my vision, always a step behind the reality everyone else could see. When midnight struck, I walked the 7 blocks in silence. The city was quiet, caught between the last call and the first light. I turned the corner. He was closer this time, standing not by the bench, but beside the lamppost. His head was still bowed, his hands still buried deep in his coat. But I could hear something, a sound like a whisper caught in the wind. I strained to listen, but it slipped through my ears like smoke. "Dad," my voice cracked. It felt like saying the word opened a wound I didn't know I still had. He didn't move, but I swear I saw his shoulders flinch. A twitch, a reaction. I stepped closer. "Dad, is it you?" The whisper came again, this time louder. Not words, not yet, just the unmistakable echo of breath. I took another step forward. "Why now?" I whispered. He lifted his head, slowly, deliberately. And in that flickering light, I saw his face for the first time. It wasn't exactly how I remembered it. There were details that felt off, like someone had painted his features from memory, but their hand had trembled. His eyes, my eyes, were hollow, not blank, not dead, just emptied of something essential. His mouth moved. I held my breath. I stepped even closer, but the streetlight flickered hard once, twice, and he was gone. I stood alone at the corner, breath fogging in the air, my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. He tried to speak. I started keeping a journal. I wrote down everything I saw, what time I arrived, what direction he faced, what he wore, every flicker of movement, every whisper of sound. It became a ritual. My week existed only to lead to that moment at midnight. Friends stopped calling. Work became an afterthought. I lied to my manager, saying I'd taken up night classes. I didn't care. None of it mattered anymore, because I was going to talk to my father again. On the 4th Friday, I brought something with me, his watch, the one they'd given me from the hospital, cleaned of blood, but cracked across the glass. I hadn't looked at it in years. I held it in my palm as I waited. Midnight. He was there. This time he turned to face me. I didn't run. My legs screamed at me to flee, but I held my ground. The air grew colder. The wind stopped. "Dad," I said. His mouth opened. I saw his lips shape something. "Stop." That was the word. Clear as a bell. I felt it more than I heard it, like it rang inside my bones. "Stop what?" I asked. But he shook his head. The light above us began to sputter violently. A buzzing sound filled the air. I saw his eyes fill with panic, not mine. He pointed across the street, toward the alley, and then, without warning, he vanished again. This time, I didn't stand there. I ran. I ran into the alley, my breath loud in my ears, the watch clutched in my fist. It was empty, nothing but trash bags and the reek of rot. But on the wall, in black spray paint, were 3 words. "He never stopped." My blood froze. My knees buckled. Because that wasn't new graffiti. It had been there for years. I remembered seeing it when I was a kid, but I never understood what it meant. Until now. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor of my apartment, the watch in one hand, my journal in the other. My father had said one word. He'd pointed to the alley. He was trying to tell me something. But what? Who never stopped? The man who killed him. Was he trying to warn me? Or was he trying to protect me? The next Friday couldn't come soon enough. And somehow, I knew it would be different. The dead don't speak unless the living are finally ready to hear the truth. And I was ready. The week dragged, like a dying animal. Every tick of the clock mocked me. Every passing night felt like static, the kind that builds behind your eyes and never releases. I barely ate, barely worked. My mind replayed the image of him pointing to the alley, mouthing the word that had sunk its claws into my chest. Stop. The phrase on the wall. He never stopped, clung to my thoughts like a parasite. I read it over and over in my journal, where I'd written it in all caps over a dozen times, sometimes so hard the pen tore the page. Friday came again. Midnight. I stood at the corner of 52nd and Harrow, gripping the cracked watch like it was a talisman, as if its jagged hands could point me toward truth. The air was thick, still. I could hear the blood in my ear. And then he appeared. Closer now, just across the street. His face fully visible, no longer cloaked in shadow, and for the first time, he looked afraid. His mouth opened. "No more," he said. A whisper, but one that hit like thunder. "I don't understand," I replied, stepping off the curb. "Tell me what to do." He pointed again, not to the alley this time, but to the bench. I turned slowly. There, resting where the ivy had retreated slightly since last week, was an envelope. I ran to it. It was addressed to me. My full name, written in my father's unmistakable cursive. The same loops and sharp edges that had signed every report card, every birthday card, until his hand was silenced forever. With trembling fingers, I opened it. Inside, a single photograph, an old Polaroid, blurry, faded. But I recognized the scene instantly. Me, as a child, maybe 7 years old, standing on this very corner. My father was behind me, hand on my shoulder, and behind him, a car, a dark sedan. The license plate, obscured by the flash, written in ink on the back. He followed us home. I looked up. My father was gone again. The photo slipped from my hands. A chill rippled through me, sharp as glass. I turned in circles, scanning the street, the alley, the rooftops, nothing. But something had shifted. That night, I went home and pulled out the old boxes from the closet. Photos, receipts, letters, anything left of the man I barely knew. My father was a quiet man, not cold, but distracted, like he was always somewhere else. Now I understood. He was somewhere else, watching, waiting, protecting. I dug until I found it, a newspaper clipping I hadn't read in years. His obituary. The headline had been brief. Local man killed in hit and run. But the article included a quote I had never paid attention to before. He was seen arguing with someone an hour before the accident, a man in a dark sedan. According to witnesses, the confrontation seemed heated. No one caught a plate number. I didn't sleep. I scoured old police reports, public records, traffic citations, anything tied to that make and model. And there it was, tucked deep in a court archive. A name, a repeat offender, charged with multiple DUIs, reckless endangerment, and one hit and run that was mysteriously dropped. Name Calvin Rhodes. I whispered it out loud. The name tasted like rust. I needed more. The next Friday, I came early. I sat on the bench, the photo in my hand, the name in my mouth. Midnight struck. A car passed. Then silence. He appeared again. Across the street. I stood, held up the photo. This man, is this who you meant? My father nodded. Did he kill you? Another nod. But that was years ago, I said, voice trembling. Why now? He lifted his hand slowly and pointed again. Not at me, not at the alley, but the apartment building behind him. The top floor. The light was on. I felt my body turn to ice. Is he here? I asked. My father didn't speak, but I saw it in his face, in the desperation in his eyes, in the sorrow. Is he coming after me now? This time, he didn't nod. He vanished. I stared up at the lit window. A shadow moved behind the curtains. My breath caught. I knew what I had to do. I ran home and packed a bag, just essentials. The photo, the watch, my journal. I didn't feel safe anymore. The shadows felt deeper, the silence heavier. I didn't know how or why, but Calvin Rhodes was alive, and something told me he hadn't forgotten what happened that night. Neither had my father. I left the apartment that night and checked into a motel 2 towns over. My phone off. No social media. I didn't tell anyone. The next Friday, I returned to the corner. He wasn't there. For the first time in 7 weeks, the corner was empty. And somehow, that terrified me even more. The 7th Friday passed, with silence. I sat on the bench for hours after midnight, scanning every shadow, every breath of wind, but my father didn't come. The absence felt heavier than his ghost ever had. I walked the neighborhood aimlessly, circling the block like some wounded animal looking for a place to die. Something had changed. He had shown me the light in the apartment. The figure in the curtain, Calvin Rhodes, and now he was gone. I didn't know what terrified me more, that my father had moved on, or that I was alone in this now. Back at the motel, I couldn't stop pacing. I flipped through the journal, rereading every detail. I clutched the photo, examining the background. And then I saw it, something I'd missed. A sign in the distance, barely visible behind the car in the photo. Hudson Apartments. My hands trembled. Hudson Apartments wasn't near 52nd and Harrow. It was 2 neighborhoods over. And I remembered something else. That light in the window last week. My father hadn't pointed to my apartment. He'd pointed past it. Behind it, the building across the alley. The Hudson. It all clicked into place.
I didn't sleep. I waited for daylight, like it was a lifeline.
As soon as the sun rose, I walked. No cab, no bus. Just my legs, and a growing sickness in my gut. When I reached the Hudson, I stood across the street and stared. 5th floor, 3rd window from the left. The same curtain. The lobby was unassuming. Beige walls. Smell of old cigarettes and microwave meals. A desk clerk glanced up, but didn't say a word. I slipped past, heart pounding, and took the stairs 2 at a time. 5th floor. Hallway of peeling paint and muffled TVs. I counted the doors until I stood in front of 5C. I raised my hand to knock, then froze. Footsteps. Inside. Then silence. My breath caught. I pressed my ear to the door. Nothing. And then, clear as day, a whisper. Don't. It was his voice. My father's. I stepped back, shaken, my chest constricted. I glanced around the hallway. Empty. Then I heard the other voice. A man's voice. Deep, raspy, laughing. Stupid old bastard, it said, still whispering in shadows. I backed away. My knees wanted to fold. I ran. Back to the motel. I locked the door, sat on the edge of the bed with my head in my hands. My father wasn't just haunting me, he was still haunting Calvin Rhodes. But Rhodes could hear him too. That night, I dreamed of the accident. Not the way I remembered it. The call, the hospital, the closed casket. No, I saw it through my father's eyes. He was on the corner, waiting for the light. I was ahead of him, skipping, swinging a toy by its string. A car came fast. Headlights, engine roar, tires screeching, but it didn't swerve. It aimed. My father shoved me, screamed my name, and then nothing. I woke gasping, cold sweat. The watch lay beside me on the nightstand, ticking loudly despite the crack. Friday was approaching again. That day, I went to the library. I dug into Calvin Rhodes. News stories, court records, social mentions. The man was a ghost. No recent photos, no activity, as if he'd gone underground, or was hiding in plain sight. I returned to the Hudson that night. Midnight. I stood on the rooftop across the street, binoculars shaking in my hands. The light in 5C flicked on. A silhouette moved behind the curtain. And then something impossible. The curtain pulled back, just a sliver, enough for me to see his face. Older, grey hair, sunken eyes. But it was him, Calvin Rhodes, and behind him, my father, standing in the corner of the room. Motionless, his eyes locked on mine through the glass. Even across the distance I felt the message. He knows you're coming. I dropped the binoculars. I had to do something. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about survival. My father had kept Rhodes at bay for years. Maybe his spirit had anchored itself to this street, this moment, to protect me. But that anchor was fading, and Rhodes was waking up. The next day, I bought a burner phone and called an old contact from college, Tessa. She'd gone into private investigation, and I trusted her more than anyone. Can you pull a background check? I asked. Name's Calvin Rhodes. Last known residence, Hudson Apartments. She didn't ask questions. Just promised to call me back. An hour later, she did. Okay, you're not going to like this, she said. That name's flagged. The guy's connected to a bunch of old cases. 2 that disappeared from the system entirely. The weird part, his death certificate was filed 10 years ago. I went cold. Say that again. He's legally dead. Cause of death. Car accident. But I checked the DMV. Someone renewed his driver's license last month. My voice felt like sandpaper. He's alive. I saw him. Tessa paused. Then someone's hiding something big. Be careful, okay? This guy's not just a drunk driver. He's something else. That night, I sat in the motel room, staring at the photo again. My father's hand on my shoulder. The car behind us. The words he followed us home. Next Friday, I would confront him. And maybe I wouldn't come back. Friday night returned like a dark promise. The city moved like a slowed reel. Cars hushed, people absent, time folding inward. I stood outside the Hudson Apartments just before midnight, a knife tucked in my pocket, a can of mace in the other. I wasn't ready. I'd never be ready. But I had no choice. I didn't come alone. Tessa parked around the corner, engine idling. You've got 15 minutes, she said. If I don't hear from you by then, I'm calling the cops. Thank you, I whispered. She nodded. But her eyes held something sharp. Be careful. That building is a grave. I stepped inside. The clerk wasn't at his desk. The hallway hummed with a low, electrical buzz that seemed to vibrate beneath the skin. I climbed the stairs, one by one, each creak feeling louder than the last. 5th floor. I stood outside 5C. I didn't knock this time. I pressed my ear to the door. Silence. Then, a voice. Hoarse. Laughing. He brought you. Just like I knew he would. My spine locked. I gripped the knife tighter, heart pounding. I turned the knob slowly. It opened. The room inside was dark except for the dim light from a single standing lamp in the corner. The air smelled old, like mildew and copper. Heavy curtains covered the window. And in the middle of the room sat Calvin Rhodes. He looked ancient, hollowed out. But his eyes, sharp, feral, glowed with something unnatural. You shouldn't have come, he rasped. Why did you kill him? I asked. Why my father? He leaned forward. Because he tried to stop me, and I don't stop. He smiled then. It wasn't a human smile. It was something primal. Wrong. You were just a boy. You don't remember what he saw, what he knew. What are you? I asked. My voice didn't feel like mine. He laughed again. I was the beginning, and he tried to make me the end. From the shadows behind him, something moved. My father, his figure emerged slowly, solemnly, eyes fixed on me. Dad, he nodded. Not to me, but toward Rhodes. Now, he whispered. Calvin stood, too fast, too sudden. I pulled the knife instinctively, but before I could move, my father stepped between us. A sound erupted like air imploding. Calvin screamed. Light flared, white and burning. My father reached out and touched Calvin's chest. For a moment, everything froze. Calvin's eyes went wide, mouth agape. A howl escaped him, not just pain, but fury. And then he collapsed. The room darkened. My father turned to me. His face had changed. There was peace there, sadness, relief. I'm sorry, he said. I don't understand, I whispered. He stepped closer. The outline of his form began to shimmer. I never wanted this for you. I thought I could keep him bound here, trapped by guilt. But when you came back, he woke, and I couldn't hold him. You saved me, I said. He smiled, and it nearly broke me. No, you saved me. You remembered me. That gave me the strength to finish it. I don't want you to go, I choked. I never really left. His fingers brushed my shoulder, warm, real, and then the light grew again. And he was gone. I stood alone in the apartment. Calvin's body lay crumpled at the base of the lamp, but something told me he was no longer a threat. I stepped outside just as Tessa burst from her car. You okay? What happened? I didn't have the words. I just nodded. I think it's over. Let's get the hell out of here, she said, and I didn't argue. That night, I returned to the corner at 52nd and Harrow. The streetlight still flickered. The bench still groaned beneath my weight. But there was no ghost. Only me, and for the first time in years, that was enough. For days, there was only silence. No footsteps behind me. No chill in the air at midnight. No whisper threading through the sound of traffic. Just me. The living, carrying a weight I hadn't earned and barely understood. But grief isn't a wound you can stitch closed. It festers in quiet. And in that quiet, things stir. It began the following Friday, midnight. I didn't mean to go back, but my feet moved like they remembered something. My mind wanted to forget. 52nd and Harrow greeted me like an old photograph. I sat on the bench, waiting. Nothing. Then, as I stood to leave, the streetlight went out. Just a flicker at first, then darkness. My chest tightened, but no figure appeared. No voice. Instead, a shadow passed behind me. I turned. A man was walking across the street, slow and deliberate. I couldn't see his face. But he wasn't Calvin. He wasn't anyone I recognized. He paused beneath the lamp, looked at me, then vanished into the alley. I didn't follow. I couldn't. Back at the motel, I scribbled it all into the journal. One line over and over. Not over. Not over. The next day, Tessa called. They released the body, she said. Calvin's. You should know. There was no ID. No fingerprints in the system. Nothing. I frowned. What do you mean nothing? He had a record. Yeah, he did. But whoever that was, wasn't him. The line buzzed with static. Wait. Are you saying it wasn't Calvin Rhodes? I'm saying the man you saw might have worn his face. But it wasn't him. The coroner's report flagged something strange. No dental records. No bone density match. Like the body wasn't meant to be identified at all. I felt sick. I sat with that knowledge all night, replaying every moment in 5C. The words he'd spoken, that smile, that final scream. And my father. He hadn't destroyed a man. He'd destroyed a vessel. Another Friday. Midnight. I walked to the alley. Spray paint still covered the wall. He never stopped, but something new had been added beneath it. He changed names. My legs gave out. I sat in the dirt, staring. Who was writing this? Who knew? Then, I remembered the shadow. The man who'd walked past me. I needed answers. Real ones. Not from the dead. From the living. The next day, I drove to my father's old workplace, a community center he volunteered at on weekends. No one had seen him since the funeral, but the older receptionist remembered his face. He used to talk about a man who followed him, she said. Thought he was paranoid, but he wrote about it, I think. Kept something in his locker. She led me to it. The combination was the date of my birth. Inside, a weathered notebook. My hands shook as I flipped through it. My father had known, for years. Entries detailed sightings. Paranoia, a name that kept changing. Calvin Rhodes was only one of many. Over the years, this man, this thing had moved through lives like a ghost in flesh. Different towns, different faces, but always the same eyes, the same hunger. One entry chilled me. He wants the boy next. I don't know why. Maybe because I defied him. Maybe because the boy can see me now. I can't hold him forever. But if I fall, maybe my presence will tether him long enough. Tears blurred the words. My father hadn't just died. He'd sacrificed himself, bound something evil to this place, to protect me, and now that tether was gone. Another entry. If he ever returns, look for the signs. The light flickers, the wind dies, the alley speaks. If he changes again, follow the echo. It leaves traces. I knew where to go next. The alley. Friday. Midnight. The wind died. The light flickered, and I heard it. A voice, but not my father's. Lower, deeper, cruel. You see me now? I turned. The alley was empty, but the voice came again. You set me free. I screamed, but no one came. The city was silent, and something moved in the darkness. Not Calvin, something wearing his shadow. I stopped going back. For a week I locked the motel door and taped the curtains shut. I slept with the watch under my pillow, and the journal clutched to my chest like a Bible. I ate only what I could heat in a microwave. I stopped checking the time, because I knew what time it was. Always. Midnight. Friday. It lived inside me now. And yet, I couldn't hide forever. The moment I heard the voice in the alley, I knew the haunting had changed shape. It wasn't tied to a street corner anymore. It had followed me back. The whisper moved through air vents, slipped beneath door frames, curled under my skin. One night, I woke to find my father's watch ticking beside me, when I knew I had left it in the locked drawer. Another time, the journal flipped pages on its own. Then the whisper came again, not outside, but beside my bed. You let him out. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. By the third day, my hands were shaking so violently I couldn't hold a cup. Tessa called, and I didn't answer. I wanted to keep her out of this. But the thing knew her too. It whispered her name. I had to act. Not run, not hide, bind. The answer was in the notebook. My father's. He'd tried to bind it once, somehow. Maybe with a ritual, maybe with blood. I didn't know, but I had to retrace his steps. So I did what I'd been too afraid to do. I went home, back to the apartment I hadn't seen since I fled. Dust coated everything. The air was stale, like something had been waiting, holding its breath. The moment I stepped in, the hallway light flickered. I lit candles, drew the blinds, pulled out the pages from my father's notebook, and tried to recreate what I saw. Circles, symbols, words scratched out and rewritten. I placed the cracked watch at the center, and then I waited. Midnight came like thunder. The air grew cold. The flames dimmed. A voice, deep and warped, filled the room. You don't know what you're doing. I know enough, I said. My voice sounded small, but steady. I know you're not supposed to be here. I've always been here. He stepped from the shadow of the closet. The same shape, the same eyes, but the face was different now, shifting, melting into features I didn't recognize. You wear them like clothes, I said. You're not a man. You never were. He smiled. Teeth too white, too many. I wore your father longer than you think. My breath caught. What? He stepped into the circle. The candles flared. He fought, he resisted, but he never escaped. You saw his ghost, but he was already mine. My knees buckled. Liar. You didn't bury him, the voice said. You buried what was left. No. The symbols on the floor began to glow. The watch ticked faster. He saved me. He sacrificed. He was my cage. A wind ripped through the apartment, slamming doors, cracking glass. You broke the chain when you came back. I dropped to my knees. Then I'll fix it. I read from the notebook. The words trembled out of me. Half of them made no sense. Ancient phrases, names I couldn't pronounce. My blood fell on the circle, accidental, from a cut open by the broken glass. The thing screamed, the floor groaned beneath us. The watch cracked further, a second fracture webbing across its face. I bind you, I shouted, to silence, to stillness, to memory. The shadow twisted, tried to escape, but the circle held, and then it stopped. The candles blew out, the air warmed, and the thing was gone. I don't know how long I sat there, knees bloody, hands shaking. Morning light crept through the blinds. I picked up the watch. It had stopped. 12 origin exactly. I burned the notebook, flushed the ashes. I didn't want anyone else to read what we had learned, to try what I had done. It was over. Had to be. I moved away, got a job in another state. Tessa stayed in touch, but we never spoke of that night. And yet, every Friday, at midnight, I wake up, and I listen. It happened again, on the 9th Friday. I was asleep, or trying to be. No candles, no watch, no circles scrawled on the floor. Just me, a cheap blanket, and the low hum of a fan that never quite masked the tension that hung in the air. I hadn't heard the voice in 3 weeks. The watch hadn't moved. I told myself it was over. Then I woke up, at exactly midnight. My phone screen glowed. 12L0, and there was someone in the room, not standing, not looming, just sitting in the chair, across from my bed. I froze. My lungs refused to work. Then he spoke. I never got to say goodbye. It was him, my father, but different. Clearer, not flickering in lamplight, or half lost to shadow. He looked as he had before everything fell apart, before the fear, before the haunting. A calm sorrow rested in his eyes. I thought I saw the last of you, I whispered. He nodded. You did. The part that suffered, the part that lingered. This is something else. I don't understand. I know, he said, but you deserve to. He leaned forward. You were never supposed to carry this. That thing he was never meant for you. I thought I could hold him. I thought I could bury him in the place he hurt me most. That corner, that midnight. You did, I said. You bound him. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Only for a time. But when you came back, he latched onto your grief. It gave him a door. That's how they work. Things like him. They look for pain. They slip through memories like cracks in the wall. I clenched my fists. Then why come back now? Because you finished what I couldn't, he said. You broke the cycle. But endings matter, son. Closure matters. He stood. The room didn't shake. The air didn't grow cold. It was warm, almost gentle. I was proud of you, he said. I just never said it enough. Tears stung my eyes. You did your best. Even when I didn't understand. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled something out, the watch. But whole now, restored, untouched. He placed it on the table. Keep it, he said, but don't let it keep you. Time only matters if you live it. I nodded, lips trembling. Are you at peace now? He looked away. I think so, enough at least. Then he turned to leave, but paused. One more thing, he said. The alley. You should look again. I blinked. What? But he was already gone. The next day, I boarded a bus. I hadn't set foot near 52nd and Harrow since the binding. But something drew me back. Not fear, not trauma, closure. The street looked the same, the flickering light, the ivy-choked bench, the alley, dark as ever. I stepped in. At first, nothing, just the familiar stink of rot and old oil. Then I saw it. On the brick wall, something new, a handprint. Not painted, not stained, burned in. Beneath it, carved into the wall, he won't rise if you remember me. I touched the watch in my pocket. It ticked soft and steady. I stepped back into the light, and for the first time since he died, I felt something real. Not fear, not grief, peace. Because I remembered, every Friday at midnight, I had waited, and now I could live.